Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. In today's episode, we are going deep in the 2016 Pike County Massacre. One of the scariest, ugliest, tragic stories you will ever hear. I specifically remember when I heard about this story in 2016 when this family and some friends were massacred. And a lot of news was coming out that it might have been related to the cartel because this family was growing marijuana. And so my thought process at the time was that many people and they're all connected to this massacre. My thought process was it had to be professionals. It had to be something related to cartels if it was related to marijuana grow. That was my internal thought process back then. In my mind, I was thinking, if professionals did this, there will never be justice. And so time would go on, and of course, they don't stop digging. And now there's justice to be had and answers to go with many questions that were surrounding this story. My friends, this is not for the faint of heart. And if you are sensitive to hearing ugly stories, this may not be for you. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Rest in peace to Kenneth Roden. Rest in peace, Gary Roden. Rest in peace, Christopher Roden Jr. Rest in peace, Clarence Frankie Roden. Rest in peace, Hannah Hazel Gilley. Rest in peace, Hannah Roden. Rest in peace, Christopher Roden Sr. Rest in peace, Dana Manley Roden. Taken from this world way too soon. The trial of George Wagner IV in the murders of 8 members of the Roden and Gilley families more than 6 years after their deaths is beginning at the time of this video. Prosecutors in Pike County, Ohio say that Wagner, his mother Angela Wagner, his father George Billy Wagner III, and his younger brother Jake Wagner, they conspired to murder the 8 victims in the late evening hours of April 21st and early morning hours of April 22nd, 2016, so they could have sole custody of a daughter Jake shared with Hannah Mae Roden, who was only 19 years old. According to the prosecutors, they say the conspiracy started in December 2015 when Angela Wagner found a Facebook message between Hannah Mae Roden and George Wagner's former mother-in-law, Patricia Sexton, in which they discussed the Wagner's efforts to get Hannah Mae to sign over custody of the daughter she shared with Jake. Testimony at a motion hearing in August 2020 revealed that Hannah Mae responded to Sexton, "They'll have to kill me first." She said she is not waiving her rights and signing over custody of their daughter to Jake. Special Prosecutor Angie Canepa, she stated at a May 2022 motion hearing that Angela Wagner had admitted to hacking into Hannah Mae Roden's social media accounts and the accounts of others to monitor their communications to gather damaging information. Prosecutor Canepa has said Angela Wagner showed the message to Jake and the murder plot unfolded from there. The message between Sexton and Hannah Mae Roden is important to the state's case because it establishes a timeline for the murder conspiracy and shows the Wagners' alleged obsession with controlling custody of children. It is expected to be used at trial as evidence. Patricia Sexton, she is Tabitha Claytor's mother. Tabitha is George Wagner's ex-wife, and she told investigators that the Wagners pressured her to sign over custody of the son she shared with George. Now, this is according to prior testimony. The prosecutor stated during a hearing in May that Claytor fled the home fearing for her life after the Wagners threatened to shoot her. Canepa said Claytor told investigators that she signed the documents giving up custody of her son after being told the arrangement would be temporary. Canepa said Claytor was not allowed to visit her son as the Wagners had promised. In the months after the December 2015 Facebook message, prosecutors said the Wagners prepared to carry out the murders by buying a number of items, including bug detectors that would help locate surveillance cameras on the rodents' properties, and brass catchers to catch shell casings fired from guns so they wouldn't be left at crime scenes. Canepa stated that George Wagner IV purchased the murder truck used the night of the murders and assisted in modifying it so he and Jake could hide inside of it. The prosecutor also stated that Angela, she purchased shoes from Walmart for Jake and George to wear only to carry out the murders. Those shoes have never been found, but Canepa said Angela admitted to purchasing the shoes when she pleaded guilty in September 2021. Court documents say that BCI Special Agent Seth Hageman found surveillance video from a store that showed Angela purchasing the shoes days before the murders. The receipt for the purchase was found in a search of the family's belongings in May 2017. On the evening of April 21st, 2022, prosecutors say Hannah Mae Rodin's father, Chris Rodin Sr., he was expecting Billy Wagner to visit his mobile home on Union Hill Road to discuss a drug transaction that would be lucrative for both of them. The discussion about the transaction was a ruse so Billy Wagner could gain access to Chris Rodin Sr. that evening, and that Jake and George hid in the murder truck to shoot Rodin from a distance. This is according to the prosecutor. An autopsy report revealed that Chris Rodin Sr. was shot 9 times and suffered 1 defensive wound to the arm that shattered a bone. His cousin Gary Rodin happened to be staying with him that evening and was shot twice in the head and once in the face at close range. Chris Sr.'s son Frankie Rodin, 20 years old, was shot in the trailer next door to his father's as he slept. An autopsy report revealed Frankie Rodin was shot 3 times in the head at close range. His fiancée, Hannah Hazel Gilley, she was shot 5 times in the head as she slept next to Frankie. Their 6-month-old son was in between them and found covered in blood but unharmed the next morning. Frankie Rodin's 4-year-old son was found in the home also unharmed. Chris Sr.'s ex-wife Dana Manley Rodin, she was shot 5 times in the head in her trailer down the road. In the same mobile home, Chris Sr. and Dana's daughter, Hannah Mae, she was shot twice in the head in her sleep as her newborn slept next to her. The newborn baby was unharmed. Hannah Mae, she had given birth days before this incident to a baby girl fathered by Hazel Gilley's brother. Hannah Mae's younger brother, Chris Rodin Jr., 16 years old, was also shot in the head. Finally, Kenneth Rodin, 44 years old, Chris's older brother, was found more than 7 miles away in his camper on Left Fork Road. Kenneth had been shot in his sleep once in the right eye. The area where he lived was remote with no cell phone service. On the morning of April 22, 2016, Dana Rodin's sister, Bobby Jo Manley, went to Chris Rodin Sr.'s home as she did each morning to feed his animals and water his marijuana plants. She opens the door and finds Chris and Gary Rodin dead. She calls 911 telling the call taker there's blood all over the house. My brother-in-law's in the bedroom. It looks like someone has beat the hell out of him. During this time, Manley's brother George James Manley, he found his sister Dana and his niece and nephew Hannah and Chris Jr. shot to death in their mobile home. Then Bobby Jo Manley finds Frankie Rodin and Hazel Gilley shot in their bed, and she told the Cincinnati Enquirer in 2016 that she took the baby covered in blood and Frankie Rodin's 4-year-old son out of the home, saying, I was not leaving those babies in there. For a little while, she was considered a suspect in this. And so many eyeballs were looking at her because of her doing the right thing, basically. But you know how the internet can be, right? You know how the story, people can just start theorizing their own way. And so they started putting her in this negative story narrative around this. By all accounts, she's never had anything to do with this. My thought process is she did the right thing. As Pike County law enforcement and special agents from Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigation descended upon the mobile homes on Union Hill Road, the largest criminal investigation in Ohio's history was unfolding rapidly. As investigators searched for clues, Kenneth Roden's cousin, Donald Stone, called 911 after finding him. And Stone tells the call taker, "There's stuff on the news. I just found my cousin with a gunshot wound." Residents in Pike County were scared, and the sheriff at that time, Charlie Reeder, he advised residents to arm themselves. Rumors spread throughout Pike County that a Mexican drug cartel had killed the Rodens because Chris Sr. and Kenneth had marijuana grow operations. The drug cartel theory was quickly dismissed by federal agents. Family members and residents gathered for prayer vigils to remember the victims and pray for justice. Then, Attorney General Mike DeWine said that it was clear from evaluating the crime scenes that the killer or killers were familiar with the layout of the homes and that 2 guns were used. In the months that followed, it was revealed that the Roden surveillance camera system was taken in an effort by the killers to cover their tracks. However, shell casings were found at the scene that would yield invaluable clues along with shoe impressions left in blood. In June 2016, Jake Wagner files a petition with the courts asking that he be awarded sole custody of the daughter he shared with Hannah Mae Roden. In the court documents, Wagner said he knew that the child was his despite the fact that paternity had not been established by a DNA test because of the hammer toe the child had that was unique to his family. The court awarded sole custody to Jake Wagner. A year passed, and it appeared to the public that investigators had few leads as no arrests had been made. Dana Roden's father, Leonard Manley, he expressed his concerns. He was saying he didn't believe the crimes would ever be solved. He also questioned the abilities of law enforcement, stating BCI couldn't catch a cold. In April 2017, Kenneth and Chris Roden Sr.'s mother, Geneva Roden, and his sister, Teresa Grebbing, they released a video message pleading with anyone with information about the homicides to come forward, begging the perpetrators to come forward, begging anyone who knew anything. They could not handle the pain and they wanted answers. The video's release came days before the 1-year anniversary of the murders. The following month, Ohio BCI agents and other law enforcement descended upon a farm that had recently been sold by George and Jake Wagner. The red house on Peterson Road in Adams County, Ohio, had barns and a pen for animals. Court documents would later reveal that shell casings with the unique impressions from a Walter Colt 1911 had similar markings to casings found in the driveway of the property at the Union Hill Road crime scene. That same day, Friday, May 12th, 2017, BCI agents also searched what appear to be horse trailers on a property owned by acquaintances of the Wagners. The property owner said at the time that the Wagners had asked to store their belongings at the property as they had recently sold the Peterson home. And the Wagners, they had stored their belongings on their property as they planned to move to Alaska. The Wagners were out of town at the time the properties were searched as they prepared to move to Alaska. Investigators found the Wagners' belongings stored in a truck trailer, and among the belongings were forged custody documents in a bin marked important stuff. Angela Wagner told Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy that day that she was out of town on vacation with her family and that they were being slandered. Angela Wagner told Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy that day that she was out of town on vacation with her family and that they were being slandered. Wagner told Levy she would speak to her upon her return, but said later that she was advised by her attorney not to grant the interview. The following day, Saturday, May 13, 2017, agents and sheriff deputies searched the Flynn W. Farm, which is a 2,000-acre horse farm that is owned by Billy Wagner's parents, Bob and Frederica Wagner. Billy Wagner was living at the property at the time of the murders. Following the execution of the search warrants at the properties, Ohio's Attorney General released information asking for information from people who had any business dealings with the Wagners, including any transactions involving the sale of guns or vehicles. In a strange twist, only days later, Dana Roden's brother, James George Manley, was charged with destroying government property. George's father, Leonard Manley, told Anjanette Levy at the time that his son found a GPS tracking device on his vehicle that had been placed there by state agents and that he smashed the device upon discovering it. Leonard Manley said that investigators told him that Jake Wagner had texted George Manley the night of the murders and that drew suspicion. It is not clear what, if anything, was determined about the alleged text message. Prosecutors dropped the charges against Manley days later after his attorney demanded to see the affidavits used to obtain the warrant for the GPS tracker. Let it be known that it does not look like Mr. Manley had anything to do with this, and it does look like that law enforcement might have done this without permission, trying to find proof that him or his sister was connected to this. Remember, they found the deceased. And so law enforcement, they were trying to do their due diligence to connect everyone they can, right? This is where they went overboard, barking up the wrong tree, basically, trying to do their job. And let it be known, it does not look like George Manley had anything to do with this. A short time later, the Wagners moved to Alaska. Billy, George, Angela, Jake, they all moved with George's son and Jake's daughter. While in Alaska, a pastor at a church claimed in news reports that the Wagners were being slandered. It was during the move to Alaska that Jake Wagner met a woman named Elizabeth Freeman. Freeman and Wagner would later marry, and the family moved back to Ohio sometime in 2018. Unbeknownst to the public at the time, a grand jury began meeting in 2018 to consider charges against the 4 members of the Wagner family for the murders of the Rodens and Hazel Gilley. Then, on November 13, 2018, a week after Attorney General Mike DeWine was elected governor, he called a press conference announcing the arrest of the Wagners for the 8 murders. DeWine also announced that Billy Wagner's mother, Frederica Wagner, and Angela Wagner's mother, Rita Newcomb, had been indicted on charges related to covering up the murder. Mr. DeWine, he called it the most bizarre story he'd seen in all his years in law enforcement, and that 2 weeks prior, investigators had found parts of a homemade gun silencer in a well on the Wagner's former property on Peterson Road. DeWine said the family was obsessed with control and custody of children. All 4 Wagners, at the time of their arrest, pleaded not guilty. During George Wagner IV's arraignment, prosecutors said he had been recorded on wiretaps talking about carrying out the violence against DeWine, lead BCI case agent Ryan Scheiderer, and former Pike County Sheriff Charlie Reeder if the family were arrested. In the months following the arrests, Frederica Wagner maintained the drug cartel had committed the murders. The obstruction and perjury charges she faced related to a claim by prosecutors that she lied about purchasing a bullet-resistant vest for Billy prior to the murder. Those charges were later dismissed by prosecutors after it was revealed a plate in the vest was manufactured after the homicides. Prosecutors have said they may refile the charges at a later date. Rita Newcomb, she faced obstruction of justice and forgery charges after she testified at grand jury that she signed and notarized custody documents for Hannah Mae Roden, Jake, and George Wagner. Those documents were created on April 3, 2016 and gave Angela Wagner full custody of Jake and George's children should they or Hannah Roden die. Newcomb later admitted when pleading guilty that she didn't sign the documents or notarize them and that her daughter had asked her to lie about doing so. Newcomb says she couldn't lie any longer and pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor obstruction charge and agreed to testify against her family member. In April 2021, following a number of pre-trial hearings, a last-minute hearing was scheduled on the 5th anniversary of the Roden and Gilly murders. In a somewhat shocking development, Jake Wagner agreed to plead guilty to the 23 charges he faced, including aggravated murder, conspiracy, aggravated burglary, tampering with evidence, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity, obstructing justice, and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor for fathering Hannah Mae's daughter. Prosecutors said Jake Wagner led them to the murder weapons, which were recovered from a large pond on the Flying W farm property, and the GMC Sierra the family bought and later stored in Athens County to carry out the murders. Court documents revealed a Walter Colt 1911, a Glock, and an SKS were found in the pond, along with buckets of concrete. Jake Wagner also agreed to testify against his brother and parents in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table for all of them. Months later, in September 2021, Angela Wagner pleaded guilty to a number of charges in exchange for aggravated murder charges being dismissed. She will be released after serving 30 years in prison and testifying against Billy and George. Prosecutors said Angela Wagner did not go along the night of the murders but bought items to assist and knew where her husband and sons were going that night and what they were going to do. In the months leading up to George Wagner IV's trial, the court held a number of pre-trial hearings. In one, prosecutors discussed other acts they plan to introduce as evidence. Canepa, she stated at a hearing in May 2022 that the Wagners lived in an insular lifestyle and lived as one unit, taking votes about every action the family took and even discussing when and how George and Jake would be intimate with their wives. The prosecutor also stated that the Wagners accused Elizabeth Freeman Wagner of sexually molesting one of the children and that she denied the allegation. Canepa said Freeman Wagner was also accused by the family of trying to poison the children with food and that Freeman Wagner fled the home fearing for her life after the family voted her out. Canepa says she wrote a letter to assist Freeman Wagner in changing her social security number so she couldn't be located. George Wagner's attorneys, they have filed motions with the court demanding they be given Freeman Wagner's address in an effort to interview her before she testifies. My friends, that's the tragic story of the Pike County Massacre. Please, if you're a person of prayer, pray for the families. Pray for the loved ones that are left with this horrible, horrible feeling that they'll never recover from. Now we look to see more justice done for this family, taken from this world way too soon. Thank you for joining, and I look forward to serving you again. Peace. Rest in peace.